The night was suffocating. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. 0300 hours. The kind of darkness that swallows sound, where even your breath feels like a betrayal. In the barracks of Marine Special Operations Command, most recruits were deep in the merciful escape of sleep. But not her. Never her. Staff Sergeant Rebecca Chen stood 5'2" in boots, 118 pounds soaking wet. In a world built by and for men who averaged 6 feet and 200 pounds of muscle, she was a statistical anomaly, an error in the system. At least that's what they kept telling her. But here's what they didn't tell you in the recruitment videos, what they don't show you in the glossy brochures with their perfectly diverse lineup of smiling service members. The Marine Corps doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about fairness. It cares about one thing: mission success. And if you can't pull your weight, literally, you're not just a liability, you're a death sentence for everyone around you. This is not a story about breaking barriers. This is not a story about proving people wrong. This is a story about survival, about what happens when the human body is pushed beyond what science says is possible, about the moment when doubt transforms into something far more dangerous than confidence. This is a story about 200 yards that changed everything. Rebecca Chen didn't choose the Marines. The Marines chose her, but only after she refused to let them say no. 3 recruitment offices, 3 rejections. Not because of her scores. Her ASVAB was near perfect. Not because of her physical fitness. She could run a 3-mile in under 20 minutes. They rejected her because of a number on a scale and a measurement on a tape. The 4th recruiter was different. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Hayes. 23 years in service, 3 combat deployments. A man who'd seen enough war to know that heart doesn't show up on a medical chart. He looked at this 100-pound girl with fire in her eyes and made a decision that would haunt him through the next 18 months. He signed her papers. Boot camp at Parris Island was designed to break you. 13 weeks of controlled chaos where drill instructors turned civilians into Marines through a carefully calibrated system of physical exhaustion, psychological pressure, and sleep deprivation. For Rebecca, it was 13 weeks of being the example, the one they pointed to when they needed to motivate others, the one they used when they needed to demonstrate what happens when you don't meet standards. Carry the log. She carried it. Run the obstacle course. She ran it. Complete the crucible. She completed it. But always, always there was the whisper, the doubt. She's too small. She'll never make it in the real world. Boot camp is one thing. Combat is another. She graduated, barely, middle of her class, exactly where command wanted her. Not high enough to be celebrated, not low enough to be discharged. The perfect proof that the system worked, that anyone could make it if they tried hard enough, but also the perfect excuse when things went wrong. Then came the letter. Marine Special Operations Command, MARSOC, the elite, the ones who go where regular Marines can't, the ones who operate in the shadows, in the spaces between official wars and unofficial operations. Critical skills operators, raiders, the deadliest warriors the Corps produces. Most Marines never get the invitation. Rebecca got it, and with it, a note scrawled at the bottom in handwriting she recognized. Gunnery Sergeant Hayes. Prove me right. Assessment and selection. 3 weeks that make boot camp look like summer camp. They don't break you at A&S. They strip away everything that isn't essential, until all that's left is the truth of who you are. Can you navigate 30 miles with 80 pounds on your back? Can you make decisions under extreme stress? Can you be trusted with the lives of men who will doubt you every day? The dropout rate hovers around 70%. For women attempting special operations across all branches, it's higher, much higher. Not because they're weaker, but because the standard is built on male physiology, carry capacity, upper body strength, size requirements that assume a certain baseline of mass. Rebecca knew the statistics. Everyone did. They were posted on the walls of the compound, not as discouragement, but as fact. This is what you're up against. This is reality. Adapt or fail. The first week, she was invisible. The instructors didn't acknowledge her. The other candidates, all men, didn't speak to her. Not out of malice, but out of calculation. Why invest in someone who statistically won't make it? Why form a bond that will break in 7 days when she rings the bell and quits? But she didn't ring the bell. Not after the first ruck march when her shoulders screamed. Not after the underwater knot tying drill when her lungs burned. Not after the midnight navigation course when she got lost and had to find her way back using nothing but stars and instinct. By week 2, they started to notice. Not respect, not yet, but acknowledgement. She's still here, against odds, against expectations, against biology itself, some whispered. And that whisper grew into something else, resentment.
Instructor First Sergeant Kyle Morrison had seen dozens of female candidates attempt selection. None had made it past week 2 in his tenure. He wasn't sexist, he told himself. He was realistic. The standards existed for a reason. Lives depended on every operator being able to carry their weight and then some. If you couldn't drag a 200-pound man in full gear out of a kill zone, you didn't belong here. It wasn't personal. It was physics. But Rebecca kept showing up, kept completing events, kept meeting minimums, and Morrison began to see her not as a trailblazer, but as a problem. Because if she somehow passed, it would open the floodgates. Standards would be questioned. Politicians would get involved. The purity of the Raiders would be compromised by social engineering. He didn't want to see her fail. He needed her to fail, and he had 2 weeks to make it happen. Week 3. The Crucible Week, where assessment becomes selection, where they stop testing your body and start testing your soul. Sleep deprivation reaching critical levels, caloric deficit pushing candidates into muscle catabolism, stress positions designed to reveal who breaks when everything hurts and nothing makes sense anymore. The casualty evacuation drill, the one they all feared, the one that ended more careers than any other single event. Not because it was the hardest physically, though it was brutal, but because it revealed truth. In the chaos of simulated combat, with blanks firing and instructors screaming and smoke obscuring everything, you had to locate a downed teammate, assess their injuries, and extract them from the hot zone to a casualty collection point 200 yards away, under fire, under time, under the weight of a fully grown man who wasn't helping you. Morrison designed the course himself. 200 yards of hell, uneven terrain, obstacles, simulated enemy fire meaning you had to low-crawl sections while dragging dead weight. And the casualty, he made sure it was Lance Corporal Jake Sullivan, 6'3", 235 pounds, a former college linebacker who joined the Corps after blowing out his knee. When Morrison announced the pairings, Rebecca's name matched with Sullivan's. The silence in the briefing room was absolute. Every candidate knew what it meant. This wasn't training, this was an execution. Morrison was ending her run in the most public, undeniable way possible. She would fail because she physically could not move that much mass, that far, in the time allotted. And when she failed, it would be because of capability, not discrimination. Clean, legal, final. Sullivan approached her after the briefing. He wasn't cruel, just honest. "Listen, Chen, nothing personal, but there's no way you can drag me 200 yards. I've seen guys your size try to move me in training drills. It doesn't work. Maybe you should talk to Morrison. Get a different partner." Rebecca looked up at him, way up. "I'm not asking for a different partner." "Then you're asking to fail." "Maybe, but I'm not asking." That night, while others slept, Rebecca was in the gym, not lifting, not running, calculating. She pulled Sullivan's personnel file, 235 pounds, add 70 pounds of gear, 305 pounds total. She weighed 118, ratio of nearly 3-to-1. In a straight drag pulling from behind, she'd need to generate enough force to overcome ground friction. Coefficient of friction on dirt, approximately 0.5, so roughly 150 pounds of horizontal force needed. Her max deadlift was 180, possible but not sustainable over 200 yards. She needed a different approach, not strength, leverage. She spent 3 hours studying carries. Fireman carry, impossible, she couldn't lift him. Drag by arms, too slow. Drag by vest, better, but still too much sustained pull. Then she found it, an old combat medic technique from Vietnam, the Skedco drag, using your body weight and leg drive instead of arm strength. It was slower, but it was sustainable, and it kept you lower, harder to hit. She practiced on sandbags, 300 pounds, dragging it using her technique, 15 yards, rest, 15 more, building muscle memory. By 0400, she'd dragged that bag 300 yards total. Her hands were bleeding, her hips felt dislocated, but she knew it was possible. 3 hours later, the drill began. The sun was a cruel joke, barely cresting the horizon but already promising a scorcher. Temperature predicted to hit 98 degrees, humidity at 70%. In full gear, it would feel like 110. Heat exhaustion would be a factor. Dehydration. The body would want to quit before the mind even register failure. The course laid out before them like a nightmare given physical form. 200 yards. In a straight line, that's 2 football fields minus 20 yards, a distance any Marine could sprint in under 30 seconds. But this wasn't a sprint. This was survival. The first 50 yards, open ground, minimal cover. You'd be exposed. The extraction point started in a shallow depression, simulated blast crater, where Sullivan would be lying wounded. From there, you had to drag him up a slight incline, maybe 7 degrees, but with 300 pounds, it might as well be vertical. Yards 50 to 100. The gauntlet. Obstacles placed intentionally. A drainage ditch, 3 feet deep. 2 rows of concertina wire, requiring a low crawl. Scattered debris, chunks of concrete and twisted metal that would catch on gear and slow progress. Yards 100 to 150. The woods. Sounds good until you realize the undergrowth is thick, roots everywhere, and the instructors have positioned themselves there to provide the most realistic enemy fire. Blanks are loud. Psychologically, even knowing they're not real, the sound triggers primal fear. Candidates had been known to freeze, to abandon the drill entirely when rounds started cracking past their heads. Final 50 yards. Another open stretch, but uphill. Not steep, but enough that your legs, already burning, already pushed past limits, would have to find something extra. The extraction point was marked with orange smoke. You'd see it, you'd know how close you were, and that knowledge that you were almost there would make the distance feel infinite.
12 minutes. Seems generous. It's not. Elite candidates, peak male specimens, averaged 11 minutes. Many failed. Rebecca would need to match or beat that time while moving nearly 3 times her body weight. Morrison stood at the starting point, stopwatch in hand. Around him, the other candidates had gathered. They'd all completed their runs. Some had passed, some had failed, but all wanted to witness this. History or humiliation. Either way, it was something to see. Sullivan lay in the blast crater, playing the role of casualty. His gear was authentic. Rifle, ammunition, body armor, helmet, 70 pounds of equipment on top of his body weight. He'd been instructed to be dead weight. No helping. In real combat, the wounded don't help you save them. Sometimes they fight you, delirious with pain. Sullivan would be easier than reality, but still impossible for someone Rebecca's size. Or so everyone believed. "Chen, you're up," Morrison's voice carried across the course. Not loud, but cutting. "You have 12 minutes to extract the casualty to the collection point. Clock starts when I blow the whistle. Any questions?" Rebecca shook her head. Her hands were taped, protecting the blisters from last night. Her canteen was full. She'd eaten a protein bar an hour ago, timed so the energy would hit during the middle of the drill. Every detail mattered. Every advantage, no matter how small. "Good luck," Morrison said. He didn't mean it. The whistle pierced the morning air. Rebecca moved fast to the crater, dropping beside Sullivan. First rule of casualty evacuation: assess the patient. In training, this was simulated with a card that told you the injuries. She grabbed it from Sullivan's chest. Gunshot wound left leg, compound fracture right arm, conscious but in shock. She looked at Sullivan. He stared back. "You don't have to do this. Fail here, you can try again next cycle." "Shut up! You're in shock." She grabbed his drag handle, the reinforced strap sewn into the back of his plate carrier. "On 3, I'm rolling you on. 1, 2, 3. She used her legs, not her back, rotating him onto his side and then flat. His head lolled. Good, he was playing the part. She positioned herself at his head, threading her arms under his armpits and interlocking her hands across his chest. The Skedco position. Her back to his front. Her legs would do the work. She started pulling. Immediately, physics asserted itself. 305 pounds didn't want to move. The ground, even the slight downward slope, resisted. Her boots dug in, finding purchase in the dirt. She drove with her legs, walking backward, pulling him inch by inch. 5 yards, 10 yards. The incline started. Her quadriceps burned. This was anaerobic territory, the body demanding oxygen it couldn't get fast enough. Lactic acid building. But she'd trained for this. Last night, every ruck march before, every time someone said she was too small. 20 yards, 30. Morrison clicked his stopwatch. 2 minutes. She was on pace, but barely, and she hadn't hit the obstacles yet. The first real test, the drainage ditch. 3 feet deep with steep sides. She reached the edge and stopped, breathing hard. Sullivan's weight had carved furrows in the dirt behind them. Looking down into the ditch, then at him, she calculated. She couldn't lower him gently. She'd never get him out the other side. She had to drop him in and climb down after. "This is gonna suck," she told him. "Already does," he grunted. Breaking character, but the heat was getting to him too. She pulled him to the edge, then gave one hard push. He rolled, dropping into the ditch with a heavy thump. She jumped in after him, landing beside his head. Now the hard part, getting him up the other side. She couldn't pull him up the incline, not enough traction. She needed a different method. She grabbed his drag handle and started pushing him up the slope, using her body weight against his, her legs driving like she was pushing a car, inch by inch, her boots slipping in the loose dirt, arms shaking. And then hands appeared, 2 other candidates, already finished, watching from above. They weren't supposed to help, but something in the moment, seeing this 100-pound woman refuse to quit, moved them. They grabbed Sullivan's gear and pulled while Rebecca pushed. "Negative," Morrison's voice cracked across the course. "Candidates, step back. Chen, you do this alone or you fail." The hands disappeared. Rebecca was alone again. Sullivan halfway up the slope. She adjusted, getting lower, using her shoulder against his back, driving with everything she had. Muscle fibers tearing, lungs screaming. And then he crested the edge, flopping onto flat ground. She climbed out after him, gulping air. Morrison clicked his watch. 5 minutes, almost halfway done, but she'd burned so much energy on the ditch. The concertina wire was next. 2 rows, 18 inches space between them. The only way through was crawling, dragging Sullivan behind her. She got on her stomach, hooked his drag handle to her belt with a carabiner, and started low crawling. The wire was designed to catch, barbs everywhere. They snagged her uniform, her gear. One caught her arm, tearing through the fabric and into skin. She felt blood, warm and wet. Ignored it, pulled harder. Sullivan's weight behind her was an anchor. Every inch forward required total body commitment. Under the first row, space between, under the second, she emerged on the other side, uniform shredded, blood mixing with sweat. Morrison checked his watch but didn't call out the time. 7 minutes? 8 minutes? She'd lost count.
The woods. She pulled Sullivan into the tree line, and immediately the world exploded. Blanks firing from multiple positions, the sharp crack of rifles, the distinctive pop of flashbangs, smoke everywhere. This was the psychological section, where your brain, already exhausted, started interpreting blanks as real threats. Rebecca kept moving, backward through the woods, pulling Sullivan around trees, over roots. Her arms felt like they might detach from her shoulders. Her hands, even taped, were raw. Every breath was fire. Halfway through the woods, she tripped. A root caught her boot and she went down hard, losing her grip on Sullivan. He rolled a few feet down slope. She lay there for a moment. Every part of her body demanded she quit. Through the trees, she could see the orange smoke. 50 yards, maybe less, but 50 yards uphill with nothing left in the tank. Morrison's voice carried through the woods, amplified by a megaphone. 9 minutes, Chen. 3 minutes left. 3 minutes. She'd never make it. The math was impossible. She couldn't even stand. But then, something happened. Something they don't teach you in training. Something that can't be measured or predicted. The body has limiters, governors that prevent you from using all your strength because full power would damage muscle and bone. In normal circumstances, you use maybe 60% of your maximum capacity. But in extreme situations, life or death, the limiters release. Hysterical strength. Mothers lifting cars off children, soldiers carrying wounded through fire. Rebecca's limiters released. She stood, walked to Sullivan, grabbed his drag handle, and pulled. Her vision tunneled. She couldn't hear the gunfire anymore, couldn't feel the pain. There was only forward, only the smoke, only the mission. She pulled Sullivan up the hill, not stopping, not thinking, not acknowledging the impossibility of what she was doing. 30 yards. 20. 10. She crossed into the orange smoke, into the casualty collection point, and collapsed. Sullivan lay beside her, both of them breathing like they'd run a marathon, which, in a way, she had, while dragging a refrigerator. Morrison stood over them, stopwatch in hand. He stared at the time, looked at Rebecca, looked at the stopwatch again like it might be broken. Time, he finally said. 11 minutes, 42 seconds. The candidates who'd been watching erupted, not in celebration, in shock. She'd beaten the average. At 1/3 the body weight, she'd done what biomechanics said was impossible. Sullivan sat up, pulling off his helmet. He looked at Rebecca, still on the ground, still trying to remember how to breathe. How? He asked. Simple question, infinite implications. Rebecca managed a response. Leverage, physics, spite. Morrison clicked his stopwatch off. He should have felt vindicated. She'd passed, so the standards held. But instead, he felt something else, something uncomfortable. He'd set her up to fail, chosen the heaviest candidate, the hardest conditions, and she'd passed anyway, which meant either the standards were flawed or his understanding of them was. He walked away without a word. The other candidates helped Rebecca to her feet, helped Sullivan up, and in that moment, something shifted. She wasn't the female candidate anymore. She wasn't the diversity quota or the social experiment. She was an operator who'd proven herself in the only way that mattered, by refusing to fail. The medical tent smelled like antiseptic and sports tape. Rebecca sat on the examination table while a corpsman cleaned the cuts on her arms from the concertina wire. 15 lacerations total, none deep enough for stitches, but all needing treatment. Her hands were worse. The tape had held, but underneath, her palms were hamburger. Blisters on top of blisters, some popped, some forming. You need to rest these, the corpsman said, wrapping her hands in fresh gauze. Minimum 3 days before you use them for anything heavy. Rebecca nodded, but they both knew she wouldn't follow that advice. Assessment and selection didn't pause for healing. Tomorrow there would be another event, and another, until the final day when they either handed you a Raider patch or sent you back to the regular fleet. Sullivan appeared at the tent entrance. He'd cleaned up, changed uniforms, but he moved stiffly. The deadweight drill had taken a toll on him too.
Being dragged 200 yards isn't comfortable, even when you're not actually wounded. "Got a minute?" he asked. The corpsman finished bandaging and left them alone. Sullivan pulled up a chair. For a long moment, he didn't speak, just studied her bandaged hands. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "When Morrison paired us up, I thought it was over for you. Thought there was no way. I was wrong." "You weren't wrong about the physics. You outweigh me by more than 2-to-1. Under normal circumstances, I couldn't have moved you that far."
But you did. I did. How? And don't say leverage and spite. I need to know because... He paused, choosing words carefully. Because I'm going to be a raider. If I make it through selection, and I need to know that if I go down in some desert or jungle, that whoever's pulling me out can actually do it. Gender doesn't matter, politics don't matter, only capability. So tell me, how did you do what you did? Rebecca looked at her hands. Honestly, I don't know if I can do it again. What happened out there at the end, that wasn't training. That was something else. My body found reserves I didn't know existed, but I can't access that on command. It's only there when everything is on the line. That's when it matters, though, Sullivan said. In training, you can fail and try again. In combat, there is no try again. Either you pull your teammate out or they die. And what you showed me today is that when it matters, when it's real, you'll find a way. That's what I needed to see. Morrison doesn't see it that way, Rebecca said. He thinks I barely passed, that I got lucky. Morrison's problem isn't with you. It's with what you represent. Change. For 20 years, the Raiders have been all male. It works. The brotherhood, the standards, the culture. Letting women in, it threatens that. Not because women are less capable, but because it forces everyone to re-examine assumptions, and humans hate that. Rebecca stood, testing her legs. They held, barely. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm trying to be a raider. That's it. By existing, you change everything, whether you want to or not. He left. Rebecca sat back down, his words settling over her. She'd spent months focused on passing each event, meeting each standard. She hadn't thought about what comes after, about being the first, about every female Marine who'd come after her, pointing to her as proof it was possible, or every critic pointing to any mistake she made as proof it wasn't. The weight of it was heavier than Sullivan had been. That evening, the candidates gathered for a briefing. Only 37 left out of the original 93 who started assessment and selection. 3 weeks of attrition, leaving only the hardest, the most committed, the most capable. Morrison stood at the front of the room, his face unreadable. Today you completed the casualty evacuation drill. 68% pass rate. For those who failed, you'll report to admin tomorrow morning for outprocessing. For those who passed, congratulations. You're still here, which means tomorrow we find new ways to break you. A tired laugh from the candidates. Gallows humor, the only kind that survives selection. But before you're dismissed, I want to address something. There's been talk about one candidate's performance today, about standards, about whether they were met or lowered or circumvented. So let me be clear. Every candidate who passed today did so by meeting the exact same standard, same time limit, same...
But you did. I did. How? And don't say leverage and spite. I need to know because... He paused, choosing words carefully. Because I'm going to be a raider, if I make it through selection. And I need to know that if I go down in some desert or jungle, that whoever's pulling me out can actually do it. Gender doesn't matter. Politics don't matter. Only capability. So tell me, how did you do what you did? Rebecca looked at her hands. Honestly, I don't know if I can do it again. What happened out there, at the end, that wasn't training. That was something else. My body found reserves I didn't know existed, but I can't access that on command. It's only there when everything is on the line. That's when it matters, though, Sullivan said. In training, you can fail and try again.
In combat, there is no try again. Either you pull your teammate out or they die. And what you showed me today is that when it matters, when it's real, you'll find a way. That's what I needed to see. Morrison doesn't see it that way, Rebecca said. He thinks I barely passed, that I got lucky. Morrison's problem isn't with you. It's with what you represent. Change. For 20 years, the Raiders have been all male. It works. The brotherhood, the standards, the culture. Letting women in, it threatens that. Not because women are less capable, but because it forces everyone to re-examine assumptions. And humans hate that. Rebecca stood, testing her legs. They held, barely. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm trying to be a Raider. That's it. By existing, you change everything, whether you want to or not. He left. Rebecca sat back down, his words settling over her. She'd spent months focused on passing each event, meeting each standard. She hadn't thought about what comes after, about being the first, about every female Marine who'd come after her, pointing to her as proof it was possible, or every critic pointing to any mistake she made as proof it wasn't. The weight of it was heavier than Sullivan had been. That evening, the candidates gathered for a briefing. Only 37 left out of the original 93 who started assessment and selection. 3 weeks of attrition, leaving only the hardest, the most committed, the most capable. Morrison stood at the front of the room, his face unreadable. Today, you completed the casualty evacuation drill. 68% pass rate. For those who failed, you'll report to admin tomorrow morning for out-processing. For those who passed, congratulations. You're still here, which means tomorrow we find new ways to break you. A tired laugh from the candidates, gallows humor, the only kind that survives selection. Before you're dismissed, I want to address something. There's been talk about one candidate's performance today, about standards, about whether they were met or lowered or circumvented. So let me be clear. Every candidate who passed today did so by meeting the exact same standard. Same time limit, same course, same weight. There were no accommodations made, no asterisks. You pass or you fail. Chen passed. That's the end of discussion.
He paused, making eye contact with each candidate. The person next to you, regardless of their size, shape, or gender, is here because they earned it. In combat, that's all that matters. You trust your teammate because they've proven themselves worthy of trust. Chen proved herself today. Anyone who has a problem with that can see me after this briefing, and I'll happily discuss your concerns, along with your exit paperwork. Silence. No one moved. Good. Dismissed. The candidates filed out. Rebecca hung back, waiting until the room cleared. Morrison gathered his notes, pretending not to notice her. Finally, he looked up. Something on your mind, Chen? Why did you do that? Defend me. I thought you wanted me to fail. Morrison set down his notes. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, lacking the instructor's edge. I did want you to fail. Not because I have anything against you personally, but because I was afraid of what your success meant. I've spent my career in special operations, seen men die because someone on the team wasn't strong enough, fast enough, capable enough. Those deaths haunt me, every one. So when I see standards threatened, when I see politicians and generals talking about diversity and inclusion, all I hear is get people killed for optics. But I didn't fail, Rebecca said. No, you didn't. You passed. By meeting the standard, not by having it lowered for you. And that changes things. Because if you can pass, truly pass, then my fear isn't about capability, it's about change. And change is hard, but it's not lethal. What's lethal is rigidity, refusing to adapt. So, yeah, I defended you, because you earned it, but also because I needed to tell myself out loud that I was wrong. He picked up his notes and walked to the door, paused. Don't make me regret it, Chen. Don't let the pressure break you. The next 2 weeks are going to be harder than anything you've faced. And now you've got a target on your back. Everyone knows your name. Everyone will be watching, waiting for you to fail. Prove me right. Prove that capability matters more than prejudice. He left. Rebecca stood alone in the empty briefing room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere outside, the other candidates were at evening chow, decompressing, bonding over shared suffering. She should join them, start building the relationships that would define her career. But instead, she went to the gym, wrapped her damaged hands, and started pulling 300-pound loads again, because tomorrow would come, and the day after, and she'd need to be ready, not just physically, but mentally, to carry not just the weight of gear and casualties, but the weight of being first, of proving that it could be done, of opening a door for others who'd been told they were too small, too weak, too different. She pulled the weight across the gym floor. Her hands screamed. Her body begged for rest, but she kept pulling. Because this was the real test. Not one course, one drill, one moment of extreme effort, but sustained excellence. Day after day, week after week, year after year. The next morning, they ran a 20-mile ruck march. Rebecca finished in the middle of the pack. Not first, not last, exactly where she needed to be. Competent, capable, unremarkable in her consistency. The day after, underwater navigation. Swimming through murky water, zero visibility, using only feel and training to complete a course. She passed. So did 32 others. 5 candidates quit, ringing the brass bell that stood in the center of the compound, the bell that symbolized surrender. Its sound carried across the base, mournful and final. Week 4 began with advanced weapons training, breaking down and rebuilding rifles blindfolded, shooting at moving targets from unstable platforms, close quarters combat in mock urban environments. Rebecca was a decent shot, not the best, but consistent. She could put rounds on target under stress. In combat, that's what matters. The whispers continued. In the chow hall, during downtime, the other candidates processed what they'd witnessed. A 118-pound woman dragging a 235-pound man 200 yards in competitive time. Some were inspired, some were threatened. Most were just confused, trying to reconcile what they'd been told was possible with what they'd seen. Candidate James Ortega approached her during a break in training. He was one of the top performers, a prior enlisted Force Recon Marine who'd already deployed twice. Chen, got a question. Shoot. The drag. How much of it was technique versus just refusing to quit? Rebecca thought about it. 70-30. Technique got me through the first 150 yards. The last 50 was pure will. Why? Because I've been thinking about it. In training, we're taught to use proper body mechanics, preserve energy, think long-term. But sometimes in combat, you don't have time for perfect technique. Sometimes you just have to do the impossible thing and figure out the consequences later. You reminded me of that, so thanks.
I didn't do it to teach anyone a lesson, Rebecca said. I know. That's what makes it meaningful. The final week of assessment and selection was a 72-hour continuous operation. No sleep, minimal food, constant stress. Simulated combat missions where success in one immediately led to another, no recovery time. This is where selection really happened, where they separated those who could function under sustained duress from those who couldn't. 32 candidates remained. By the end of 72 hours, only 23 would still be standing. Rebecca doesn't remember much of those 3 days. Memory becomes fragmented when your brain is that exhausted. She remembers the cold, The missions ran day and night, and temperatures dropped into the 40s after dark. She remembers the hallucinations, shadows that moved wrong, voices that weren't there. She remembers making decisions, though she couldn't tell you now what those decisions were or why she made them. What she remembers clearly is the end. 72 hours exactly from when it started, they were called back to the compound, told to formation. 23 candidates standing in the same spot where 93 had stood 3 weeks earlier. 2/3 attrition, standard for special operations selection. Morrison stood before them. Behind him, the Raider flag. You've completed assessment and selection. That doesn't make you Raiders. That makes you candidates who didn't quit. The real training starts now, but first, we need to talk about what you've accomplished. Each of you came here with something to prove, to yourselves, to others, to the ghosts of who you used to be. And over the past 3 weeks, you proved it. Not by being the best, but by being good enough, by meeting standards, by refusing to surrender when your body begged you to. That's what makes a Raider. Not superhuman ability, but human will pushed beyond human limits. He paused, making eye contact with each candidate. When his eyes met Rebecca's, he nodded, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. Training begins Monday. You're dismissed. The candidates didn't cheer, didn't celebrate. They were too exhausted. They just dispersed, heading to barracks, to sleep, to the first real rest they'd had in weeks. Rebecca made it to her bunk and collapsed. She slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, her body was a collection of pains, joints aching, muscles sore, hands still damaged. But she'd made it. She was one of 23, one of the candidates who'd survived the filter. A knock on her door. She opened it to find Gunnery Sergeant Hayes standing there, the recruiter who'd signed her papers. He looked older than she remembered him, or maybe she just saw him differently now. Permission to enter, candidate. She stepped aside. He entered, taking in the Spartan room, a footlocker, a bunk, nothing else. Heard you made it through A&S. Barely. That's all it takes. Barely is enough. He sat on the footlocker. I'm here to tell you something you need to hear. The hard part isn't over. It's just beginning. Because now you're not just trying to prove you can make it, you have to prove you can sustain it. Every day, every mission, every decision. There will be people waiting for you to fail, hoping for it. Not because they're bad people, but because your success challenges their worldview. You can't let that pressure break you. I won't, Rebecca said. That's what everyone says. But pressure doesn't break you suddenly. It erodes you. Slowly, until one day you wake up and realize you're not the person you used to be. You're harder, angrier, more isolated, and you've lost the thing that made you special in the first place. That hunger, that drive, that refusal to accept no. So what do I do? Rebecca asked. Remember why you started. Not the grand reason, not the history or the politics, the personal reason. The thing that burns in your chest when everything else is stripped away. Rebecca thought about it. I wanted to be the best version of myself, to push past every limit people put on me. Hold on to that, because the best version of yourself isn't someone who never fails. It's someone who fails and gets back up, who makes mistakes and learns from them, who asks for help when they need it. The Marines will try to turn you into something else, a weapon, a statistic, a symbol. Don't let them. Stay human. That's how you survive this. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. What you did on that course, dragging Sullivan those 200 yards, that wasn't about strength. It was about heart. Don't forget that, because there will be days when your heart is all you have left.
He left. Rebecca sat on her bunk, his words settling over her like a weight. She thought about the next phase of training, the real training, where they'd teach her to kill efficiently, to operate in hostile territory, to make decisions that would save lives or end them, where she'd transform from a Marine into a Raider. But that transformation hadn't started on the selection course. It had started the moment she walked into that fourth recruitment office and refused to accept no. Every step since then had been building toward this, and every step forward would build toward something else, something she couldn't see yet. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in full combat gear on the tarmac at Camp Lejeune. Around her, her team prepared for deployment. 12 raiders, including her. Their mission was classified, but the destination wasn't. Afghanistan, the forever war, the place where theories met reality, and reality always won. She'd made it through the training pipeline. Months of advanced combat skills, language training, cultural preparation. She'd learned to shoot while moving, to navigate by stars, to blend into populations that didn't want her there. She'd learned the weight of a rifle carried for days, the taste of fear before a mission, the silence that exists between heartbeats when you're waiting for something to go wrong. Sullivan was on her team. So was Ortega. 10 other raiders, each one a specialist in something critical. Communications, demolitions, medicine. And her specialty? Intelligence and reconnaissance. The eyes and ears that kept the team alive. Morrison was there too, not deploying, but seeing them off. He'd been promoted, moved to an instructor billet permanently, but he'd made a point to be there for this. The first female raider deploying to combat with a special operations team. He approached Rebecca as she did final gear checks. Jen. For Sergeant. Listen to your team leader. Trust your training. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes get people killed. Professionals get people home. Understood. And Chen, prove me right one more time. She nodded. He walked away. Watching him go, Rebecca realized something. Morrison had become her biggest advocate, not because he'd changed his mind about women in special operations, but because she'd changed his mind about her. She'd proven herself not as a woman or a symbol, but as a capable operator. And in Morrison's world, that was the only metric that mattered. The deployment was 8 months. Rebecca can't talk about most of it. Classified operations in places that officially don't exist, against enemies whose names are redacted from reports. But she can talk about one mission, the one that mattered. 4 months into the deployment, the team was tasked with evacuating a high-value informant from a compromised location. The intel they'd received suggested minimal enemy presence, light resistance at most, the kind of mission they'd run dozens of times before. The intel was wrong. They hit the compound at 0200, immediate contact, heavy resistance. What should have been a 30-minute extraction turned into a 4-hour firefight. In the chaos, Sullivan took a round. Not lethal, but bad. Femoral artery compromised. He had minutes, not hours. Rebecca was 50 meters away when it happened, providing overwatch from an elevated position. She saw him go down, saw the blood, made a decision that defied training and common sense. She left her position and ran to him. The distance was 50 meters, felt like 50 miles. Rounds snapping past, the distinct crack of AK fire mixing with the heavier thump of American rifles returning fire. She reached Sullivan, dropped beside him. He was conscious but fading. The tourniquet on his leg was already soaked through. "Sullivan, get back to Overwatch," he managed. "Team needs eyes. Team needs you alive." She grabbed his drag handle, the same handle she'd pulled on that training course. But this wasn't training. The weight was the same, the stakes were everything. She started pulling, not 50 yards this time, not 200, just 50 meters to the extraction point where the rest of the team was consolidating. 50 meters through active fire, 50 meters while carrying 300 pounds and her own gear. Her body remembered. The technique she'd developed, the leverage, the drive from legs instead of arms. But more than that, her body remembered what it felt like to refuse failure, to push past limits, to find reserves that shouldn't exist. She pulled Sullivan through that 50 meters, every yard earned, every foot fought for. When she reached the extraction point, Ortega grabbed Sullivan, started providing medical care. The team's medic worked to stop the bleeding, to stabilize him enough for evac. The mission was compromised. They called for immediate extraction. Helicopters inbound. 10 minutes. The longest 10 minutes of Rebecca's life, holding security while medical worked on Sullivan, while the rest of the team returned fire against an enemy that kept coming.
But they held. Sullivan stabilized. The helicopters arrived. They loaded up and extracted, leaving the compound behind. Mission incomplete, but team intact. In special operations, that counts as success. Sullivan survived. 3 surgeries and 6 months of physical therapy, but he survived. When he returned to duty, he sought Rebecca out. Found her in the team room, cleaning weapons. "I owe you my life," he said simply. She shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. That's what teams do." "Maybe. But I want you to know something. On that training course, when you dragged me 200 yards, I thought it was a fluke. Impossible, but somehow you did it. But in that compound, when you ran through fire to pull me out, that wasn't a fluke. That was a raider doing what raiders do, refusing to leave anyone behind. I'm alive because you're on this team, and I'll tell that to anyone who asks whether you belong here." He offered his hand. She took it, not as a woman who'd proven herself, not as a symbol or a first, but as an operator who'd done the job when it mattered most. 2 years after that deployment, Rebecca sat in the same briefing room where Morrison had announced her completion of assessment and selection. But now she wore the Raider patch. Now she'd deployed 3 times. Now she had her own scars, her own stories, her own proof that she belonged. She was there to speak to a new class of candidates, 20 women, the first all-female assessment and selection course, not because the standards had changed, but because enough women had proven it was possible that the Corps finally committed to creating pathways instead of obstacles. Rebecca looked at them, saw herself 2 years earlier, saw the determination, the fear, the knowledge that they were attempting something that statistics said most would fail. "I'm not here to give you a motivational speech," she began. "I'm not going to tell you that you can do anything you set your mind to, because that's not true. Some of you will fail, not because you're not strong enough or tough enough, but because special operations isn't for everyone, and that's okay. Failure here doesn't define you. Quitting doesn't make you weak. Knowing your limits is wisdom." She paused, making eye contact with each candidate. "But for those of you who don't quit, who push through every event and every doubt and every person who tells you it's impossible, I want you to know something. The standard is the standard. No one will lower it for you. No one will give you accommodations. You'll be expected to carry the same weight, run the same distance, complete the same missions as every male candidate. And that's not discrimination. That's respect. Because when you pass, when you earn that Raider patch, no one can say you didn't earn it. 2 years ago, I dragged a 235-pound Marine 200 yards. Everyone said it was impossible. The math didn't work. The physics didn't allow it. But I did it anyway. Not because I was strong enough, but because I refused to accept that I wasn't. And that refusal, that unwillingness to surrender to statistics and expectations and limitations, that's what makes a Raider. Not size, not strength, but heart. She held up her hands. The scars from that training course were still visible, faint white lines across her palms. These scars remind me of what's possible when you push past what's probable, when you risk everything on the belief that you're capable of more than people think. Some of you will earn your own scars. Some of you won't make it that far, but all of you will leave here different than you arrived, changed by the attempt, by the refusal to accept no without trying. She stepped back. Questions. A candidate in the front row raised her hand. Young, maybe 22, barely 100 pounds. Rebecca recognized the look in her eyes, the same look she'd had. Yes? How do you deal with the pressure, knowing that if you fail, people will use it as proof that women can't do this? Rebecca smiled. You don't. That pressure is real. It's there every day. But you can't carry it while you're also carrying your gear and your mission and your teammates. So you set it down. You focus on the only thing you can control, your performance.
You meet the standard, you do the work, and you trust that your actions speak louder than anyone else's opinions. Another hand, what if we're not strong enough? What if we physically can't do something? Then you find another way. Technique, leverage, strategy. The human body is capable of incredible things when pushed past its perceived limits. But you have to be willing to push, to hurt, to fail, and try again. Strength isn't just physical, it's mental. It's refusing to quit when everything hurts and nothing makes sense. That kind of strength, you already have it, or you wouldn't be here.
The questions continued. Rebecca answered each one honestly, not sugarcoating the difficulty, not promising they'd succeed, but offering the truth. It's possible. Hard, maybe harder than anything they'd ever attempt, but possible. When the briefing ended, the candidates filed out. Rebecca stayed behind, alone in the empty room. She thought about that day 2 years ago, the 200 yards, the weight of Sullivan. The moment when her body found something extra, something beyond training and preparation. She'd been asked 100 times since then to explain how she did it. Reporters wanted to know. Documentary filmmakers, even scientists studying the limits of human performance. And every time she gave the same answer. I don't know. Because the truth is, she didn't. She couldn't access that reserve on command, couldn't summon that strength whenever she wanted. But she'd learned something more important. That reserve exists in everyone. Male, female, large, small. It's there, waiting for the moment when everything is on the line and failure isn't an option. The moment when you discover that the limits you believed were just beliefs, not reality. Morrissey appeared at the door. He'd made the trip from his new posting just to be here for the briefing. How'd it go? 20 candidates, maybe 5 will make it. Better odds than your class. You had 1. I had teammates who believed I could do it, even when they weren't sure. Sullivan, Ortega, eventually you. I didn't do it alone. No one does, Morrison said. That's the secret they don't tell you in training. Special operations isn't about individual excellence. It's about teams, about trusting the person next to you even when logic says you shouldn't. You taught me that. He handed her an envelope. Your next assignment. Team leader position. Afghanistan again. 6-month deployment. Leaves in 2 weeks. Rebecca opened the envelope, scanned the orders. Team leader. She'd be responsible not just for herself, but for 11 other operators, making decisions that would keep them alive or get them killed. The weight of it was staggering. You ready for this? Morrison asked. No, but I wasn't ready for assessment and selection either. Didn't stop me. Good answer. He turned to leave, then paused. Chen, those 20 candidates in there, they'll face the same doubts you did, the same obstacles, but they'll also have something you didn't. Proof that it can be done. You're that proof. Don't underestimate what that means. He left. Rebecca sat alone with her orders. Team leader. She thought about those 20 women attempting selection, about the ones who'd come after them, about the door she'd kicked open by refusing to accept it was closed. She folded the orders and put them in her pocket. In 2 weeks, she'd deploy again, lead a team into harm's way, make decisions with lives on the line. And somewhere, maybe one of those 20 candidates would make it through selection, would earn the Raider patch, would deploy and face their own moment of impossibility. And when they did, they'd remember that someone else had faced it before them, had dragged a 235-pound Marine 200 yards when everyone said it couldn't be done, had proven that determination weighs more than muscle, that heart matters more than size,
that the only real limitation is the one you accept. Rebecca stood and walked out of the briefing room. Outside, the sun was setting over Camp Lejeune. Candidates were running somewhere in the distance. The sound of cadence calling echoed across the base, the rhythm of the corps, unchanging and eternal. But something had changed. A door had opened, and it would stay open because Rebecca Chen had refused to accept it was closed. Not with strength, not with anger, but with simple, stubborn refusal to accept that she didn't belong. 200 yards. That's all it took. 200 yards to prove that impossible is just a word, that limits are just suggestions, that the only thing standing between you and what you want to achieve is your willingness to try when everyone says you'll fail. She walked toward the barracks, toward the next chapter, toward whatever came next. Behind her, the sun disappeared below the horizon. Ahead, darkness and uncertainty. But she'd walked through darkness before. She'd carried weight that shouldn't have been possible. She'd proven herself in the only way that mattered, by refusing to quit. The scars on her hands reminded her of that day, of the 200 yards, of the moment everything changed, not just for her, but for everyone who'd come after. The door was open now, and it would stay open as long as people like her kept walking through it, kept carrying the weight, kept dragging themselves and their teammates forward when logic said stop. 200 yards changed everything. But it was just the beginning. The real distance was still ahead. Miles and years and deployments and missions, each one requiring the same refusal, the same heart, the same unwillingness to accept limitations. Rebecca Chen kept walking, into the gathering darkness, into the unknown, into whatever came next, because that's what raiders do. They keep moving forward, no matter the weight, no matter the distance, no matter what anyone says is impossible. 200 yards at a time.